coming to those live meetups that we're doing in the Nordic part of Europe.
Okay.
It will take place in mid-April.
Great. And so, Andre, my screen is being shared now. Again, I apologize. That was my fault, everyone. But everyone should be able to see now. I did receive confirmation from a few of you, so thank you. So, Andre, you can continue.
All right. So, what was the biggest changes in JMeter 4.0? The biggest thing is that Java 9 is now supported. You probably heard that Java 10 is being released literally like a week ago. I have no information about support for Java 10 from JMeter yet. It probably works. And JMeter 4 will still work with Java 8, but it won't work with Java 7 anymore because Java 7 has ended its life and support. So Java 9 and 8 are good options to start JMeter 4.0. One of the important defaults were increased for Java virtual machine that runs JMeter. Its default memory sizes, memory limits. It's now 1 GB of memory allowed for JMeter, and you can always go and change that through JMeter launch scripts or through environment variables, and to increase the limits if you need. One big change is that test plan is now saved before running test, which means that there won't be a situation when you have ran a test and you close the window and didn't save your test. The test is automatically saved every time you press the run button. And I just want to remind you that there were related change in one of the previous versions of JMeter. It's auto backups functionality, which if we will look into JMeter directory, here inside JMeter directory, you can see directory called backups, where you might find, for example, my webinar preparations have generated periodic backups that were made by JMeter automatically, just in case you will break something in your JMX and you would like to go back to early versions. There's no good undo mechanism in JMeter, so you have to rely on these periodic backups. Just make sure you know that those backups directory, the backup directory is accessible, and you know that your files are there. It's very good thing to use when you are deep into JMeter. The next thing is visual changes and UX changes. One interesting change is that now by default JMeter, if we will launch it, it will be looking as dark because the default change is now dark color. And some of you might find it cool. I'm kind of old school guy, so I prefer changing it back into system default. So I'm going to options, look and feel, system. Here's dark color if you like dark. And I'm switching into system just because it looks better. JMeter is better be restarted after changing the visual options. And here we go, usual light system default JMeter for us. One important change is that workbench is not in the tree anymore. You might notice that there was the workbench, which used to be a place for temporary objects, elements, and different reusable pieces of your test plan. It's not there anymore because there is a test fragment and other ways for you to achieve temporary storage for your objects. There's no need in having workbench anymore. Another important thing is menu sorting. Now the menus are sorted to put more frequently used objects on top of the menus. So this speeds up significantly operating with JMeter. And you have the three most important samplers on top of the menu. This is a great speed up and great convenience for all of us. Next is the new component, which is another great improvement for JMeter because it simplifies the way we extract variables. When you extract a variable, you have a response from your request to a website, and you need to take some piece of information and put it into a variable. And it was previously done through complex regular expression that you need to build. And with boundary extractor, it becomes very, very simple because in most of the times you need to extract something that is clearly specified by left and right. So in the on-screen example, the left boundary and till right boundary, and you will get the thing in between. It's not only much easier to build this kind of extractions, but it also works faster than regular expression, and it burns less resources for you, which means you can get more hits per second from your JMeter on your machine using boundary extractor than regular expression extractor. This is a good new component. Let's review how it works. I have prepared a test plan. Here's boundary extractor demonstration. I have an HTTP request which gets blazedemo.com, and I have attached 3 boundary extractors to that sampler. First boundary extractor extracts a variable named title, and the left boundary will be title, and the right boundary will be closing tag of title. The value 0 means take random value, but if we have just one title, then we will have random of 1. Let's review what will happen. HTTP request done. I have a response data, and inside response data, I have title ending with title. This is my idea of extracting. I'm starting with something and ending with something. And if I will go into debug sampler, I will see that title variable is now blaze demo. The second extractor I have used is header, which uses another tag of h1 until closing h1. And my result of the extraction for header is welcome to Simple Travel Agency, which we can find somewhere here. And third extractor in my demonstration is multiple options extractor. So I'm taking option variable, and I'm taking any situation when my option starts like this and closes like this. Let's go and see why. I'm extracting values like this. All of them, all of these options will be extracted into numbered variables. This is used in conjunction with for each logic controller, or when where you just want, for example, to calculate how many of those were present in your response. This is the 3 basic ways of using boundary extractor, and it's much simpler to understand than regular expressions used in the past. However, regular expression is still there, so you can still use the regular expression extractor and use it the old way. JMeter is always compatible. Next thing is JSON path assertion, which has its own story. Now, JSON path assertion has been moved from third-party plugins into JMeter core component. Historically, there were JSON path extractor and assertion in third-party plugins. Let's see the JMeter plugins website. So it were here. it were here historically. Then in JMeter 3.0, there were core JSON extractor introduced, but there were no JSON assertion. So users had to use JSON assertion from third-party plugins and JSON extractor from JMeter core. Now we have fixed that. It was BlazeMeter contribution. We have contributed, moved the code from JMeter plugins custom plugin, deprecating it. And now it is a part of JMeter core to use JSON assertion. What is JSON assertion? Let's assume we have a query that requests some JSON endpoint. The result of the JSON endpoint is JSON text. And if we want to specify certain condition of a structure on these response data, we need to use JSON path syntax. And JSON assertion is about that. We are specifying JSON path, and this is the own JSON path syntax. You can find description for it on the web. You can just check for existence of that path, or you can additionally assert against expected value. In my case, this is the expected value. And when I'm running this test, it is green because it has passed, and my second item in the list of JSON has matched. If I will enable another assertion, which specifies some non-existing value, even without asserting, I'm just checking for its existence and presence. If I will run now, my assertion will fail, explaining me that there is no results for this JSON path. So now everything is in core, and that's the way to go with JMeter 4.0. You don't need JSON components anymore unless you have used them in your existing scripts. Those are still supported. The custom plugin, however, is suggested to be not used anymore and migrate onto core component where possible. This is my suggestion. Next thing is a set of new functions that were added to JMeter core, and these functions are frequently used by heavy scripters of JMeter. First function is digest. Digest is a sort of hash like MD5 or SHA-1 that you might need in some of the encryption or interactions that you have with your website. Change case is another string operations that is frequently needed. It's when you want to do uppercase, lowercase, camel case for your strings. This is the functions for your convenience. And two properties specifying if the sum of JMeter property has been defined or a JMeter variable has been defined, which helps to build the logic in your complex scripts. Let's quickly see an example for that. So the example for functions. This is my dummy debugging sampler, and this is the value I will generate. I will generate the MD5 hash for hello world, and I will also do the uppercase for hello world. And this is my first sample. In my another example, I will use if controller with unexpected variable called my variable, and this if controller will not generate me dummy sampler called situation1. Why? Because the variable has not been yet defined. Then I will set the variable through regular expression extractor. I am extracting just any text. So the variable becomes defined. And my second if controller, just having same isVar defined call, will now be true, and the situation2 will happen. Let's review how it works. I'm starting this script. First is the functions that we have used to generate digest, to generate uppercase of hello world. The set variable worked and variable became available, and we only see situation 2 because situation 1 were not happening because of undefined variable. If you will think of this working inside while loop, you can build much more complicated logic flows. Usually it was more painful because of the lack of these functions. Now let's proceed to the news in JMeter plugin space. There were no major changes in JMeter plugin space recently. It's more like regular evolution of plugins, small fixes here and there. I can quickly note that JMeter plugins manager was stabilized with issues found on Windows platform. We were fixing recently several issues reported by users, and version 0.20 is now way to go for plugins manager. For those of you who has never seen plugins manager, it's a small thing that you get here. You install JMeter plugins manager from instruction on the website here. There is JMeter plugins.org, and there is instruction how you do it. And you get this button, and through this button you open the window to control which custom plugins you want to have, you want to install or uninstall. For example, we want to uninstall JSON plugins which are now deprecated. It's just a click of a button. You will review the changes, and if you will click apply changes, your JMeter will restart, and the JSON plugin is not installed anymore. It's only inside available plugins. This is the plugins manager. For those of you who never saw it, it's a great convenience. There are many plugins available through plugins manager. So it were stabilized on Windows. There is Elasticsearch plugin, third-party plugin for Elasticsearch integration. You can find it here, Elasticsearch backend listener. It gives some nice results into Kibana, Grafana, something. It's an Elasticsearch integration plugin. There is also WebSocket plugin recently updated. WebSocket. It's the modern WebSocket, this one, which has more modern features, and it's better maintained for WebSocket users, for those who develop WebSocket support in JMeter. Next is parallel controller, which is worth noting. It's a funny component where you can execute something in parallel. Do I have it installed? No, but plugins manager will save my day quickly. Parallel. Yeah. So it's installed through plugins manager. And the idea is that all of the children of parallel controller are executed in parallel. So if I will place a couple of HTTP requests, like 1 and 2, they will be executed at the same time. If I will specify something like demo.com, like this, all right? And if I will run, I will see that they have been executed at the same time. They have started at the same time and been executed in parallel. This is the parallel controller. It's an interesting feature to use in JMeter. Next, the recent Taurus updates. Let me quickly explain what Taurus is for those of you who never heard about this tool. Taurus is an automation tool which allows you to achieve several important things. One thing is the ability to use not only JMeter but other tools like Gatling, Grinder, Locust, and many tools, and have common ground for all of them. It's the command line tool, so it enables you to automate everything through all of your continuous integrations or custom scripts. And I will quickly demonstrate you what Taurus is. Let's say I have my webinar JMX. So the Taurus is something that enables me to type BZT webinar JMX, and inside command line, it will execute my JMX and will collect results, collect the files into artifacts directory, and will show me the live dashboard. In this case, there were not enough time to generate, but I will quickly show you much longer example. So this is the Taurus tool, and it has recently got the Brew for Mac, something to simplify installation on Mac OS. Also, we have implemented the support for Postman collections executor, and this is worth showing. This is the Postman collection, which is something requesting Postman JSONs, doing some checks. And in Taurus, we are using YAML configuration files. This is my YAML configuration file saying, please use Newman, execute with concurrency 100 iterations of this Postman sample collection. And if I will run it as bzt postman.yaml, I will get this dashboard executed with Postman results, measuring me percentiles, measuring my transaction average response times, all of the results. The interesting thing with Taurus is that it is able to execute 20 different tools like this. So you will get the same picture if you run JMeter or Gatling or Postman. You will see the same dashboard, which makes your teams to work easier when you use different tools, but you still have the same picture to see and you understand each other. Another thing is, for those of you who know JMeter, there is a new feature for environment variable evaluation. YAML scripts might be quite complex, and they might be complex like this. And you might want to have some deduplication or variables used inside. So we recently added the support for environment variables, setting them inside YAML script and also using them in all of the places except scenario. You can use these environment variables. If we will review this example, here I'm using my webinar JMX to run it for 1 minute. A good example how you use existing JMX, but you change it to run for desired amount of time. I could even specify here like concurrency 20, ramp up 10 seconds. That's great. Hold for 1 minute. And in reporting settings, I am specifying for module final stats to dump CSV file of summary of the test with using 2 variables. Put it into home directory, which is specified outside of Taurus as default environment variable of my machine. and use the file name of fname, and fname is defined here. So if I will run this script now, bzt this script, we will see that my JMeter script runs now with my modified settings, and at the end of my test execution, I will see the CSV file. I will see the CSV file with the summary of my results. As you can see, one of my assertions, JSON path assertion, is triggering failures. So we see here the red things immediately. We have a good overview of what happens in our JMeter test. We see how users grow. We see the progress, how much of time do we have left till the end of the test. I will interrupt it to spare some time. And inside my results directory, I see the summary CSV that I have generated, and it has all of my results in CSV format. I'm having all of the numbers from JMeter test available. What's next? Also, we are adding more features towards a purative-based API test. This is something not that obvious, but yet important. A purative is a Python framework for Python library for API testing, where you can build easy HTTP tests. And we are experimenting with something except JMeter in BlazeMeter, because we see the problems of heavy Java virtual machine used in JMeter. For the smaller scale performance tests, we are using Python-based implementation. For a user, it looks like this. I am specifying the script inside text file with some JSON, with some default address, doing some URL gets, posts, asserting, extracting variables, doing some script that step by step does actions on my website. For a user, it looks like the same bzt YAML file execution, and you already know. Okay, let me prolong it a bit. Hold for 1 minute, 30 seconds. And not this. So if I will run it, you will see that the same thing happens and the requests are happening. But now these requests are executed by Python using framework called a purative. And what is a purative inside? It's purative inside is the Python script that is being generated from YAML using these instructions of a purative transaction, using target concept of HTTP target. This is the script that is in Python language, which means that you can take it, modify it the way you want. Still, it will be runnable with Taurus. And this is the update towards a purative tests. If you are curious what's going on there, I encourage you taking Taurus and experiment with that, because it might be faster and easier to script than JMeter, for those of you who know bits of Python. Next is Selenium-related Taurus updates. One thing about Taurus is that Taurus is able to drive Selenium browser tests. And we have added more Selenium actions into YAML syntax to be executed through Python. And we also have a support for headless for Chrome and Firefox to generate scripts using headless Chrome and headless Firefox, because recently Chrome and Firefox have achieved the headless capabilities and released them. We have also added WebDriver IO executor and Robot Framework executor. For those of you who use these technologies or your colleagues use those technologies, you can take your existing scripts of WebDriver, Robot Framework, and execute them with Taurus, getting that level of interaction, the same way I demonstrated that with Postman collections. Let's review how Selenium actions look in Taurus. Here's my script, and in my script, I am prepared to use headless option. I am specifying Chrome as browser, and in my request, I will open blazedemo.com, and I will perform some browser level action, like wait for XPath to be present on the page. Then, next step, do some actions of clicking by several XPath options. Then wait again for something to appear on the screen. This is Selenium browser level interaction. Another action, click by something, then another set of actions. Input keys, click by CSS selector, wait, and make sure that something exists on the page. And instructions for Taurus to execute that with Selenium executor. Let's see how will it look like using EZT and my YAML file. And the browser pops up and the sequence starts to happen. All of the actions, as fast as it can, my browser performs those actions. And as a result, I will see the numbers in my dashboard that reflect how fast this transaction is executed and pieces of the transactions are executed. I will interrupt it, and switching into headless mode using headless Chrome is this easy for me. I'm just putting headless true and executing same script, but now I won't see the browser because there won't be any GUI for Chrome or Firefox brought up. It's only headless test execution, but we still see the results, some transactions happening, and we see the numbers, which transactions are fast or slow, as well as the dynamics, as the KPIs of percentiles, everything. So these are the Selenium features for Taurus, the updates that we got. And third piece of the updates for Taurus is the feature to start any existing BlazeMeter test from command line. For those of you who like and use BlazeMeter application already, and you want to have a command line way to trigger a test in BlazeMeter that you have, there is now ability to specify the test ID in Taurus YAML file, and through Taurus trigger the BlazeMeter test without modifying the BlazeMeter test. And one more interesting update is that BlazeMeter now migrates onto Taurus-based tests completely. So if we will go into BlazeMeter dashboard and we will start creating new tests, there will be the new JMeter test button, and inside there is Taurus. So this new UI of BlazeMeter configuring the test, there is Taurus working inside. So everything I was showing you with Taurus, all of the Postman collections or browser testing, it's all doable through BlazeMeter at scale with many geographic locations possible. All of the features that BlazeMeter provides, it's now available with not only JMeter, but any of the tool that Taurus supports. We will go into gettaurus.org and we will see the execution settings. We see the list of executors supported, and there are 20 executors supported at the moment. Go there, you will find probably several technologies that you're using now, worth trying to adapt that with Taurus and play with that nice technology. let's go further. We have actually reached the end of the updates part, and we will start the interactive session of Q&A soon. And Jason, do you want to do any announcements?
Sure, I'll tell people a few things. Again, apologies for at the beginning that I didn't share my screen for the first few minutes, but hopefully it's been better since. We're gonna have about 20 minutes for Q&A. You can ask your questions in the questions tab. You'll have to bear with me as I kind of go through the questions. But before we even get to that, I just wanted to tell you some resources and some URLs that are relevant to the discussion of today's webinar. I assume that all of you are JMeter users, but if not, and you want to install JMeter, the link to do so is on the screen here. I'll skip the second bullet point for a second, then I'll come back to it in a second. But JMeter plugins, which Andre mentioned, that's at jmeter-plugins.org. Taurus is at gettaurus.org. All of these are open source, by the way, and free to use. Okay, you can create a free account for BlazeMeter, which allows you to take open source based tests and to then run them in the cloud at scale with a lot of different benefits. You can start testing today with BlazeMeter in a free account at blazemeter.com. And also the BlazeMeter blog, for those who are familiar or those who are not familiar, we have hundreds of articles on various different use cases and how to do various things on JMeter. So it's very relevant to this topic, and you can find out more on blazemeter.com/blog. Finally, I just wanted to talk about, just for a second, the JMeter Slack community. We sent out an email about it recently, and we already have over 1,000 members in the community asking JMeter questions and receiving answers. This is not by us necessarily, this is by you, by the community itself. We have an opportunity there to announce webinars, upcoming meetups, to talk about a wide variety of JMeter topics like JMeter and Jenkins, and so on and so forth. I will send this link to the JMeter Slack community in the email with the recording as well, but I just wanted to mention that during the webinar itself. So because I'm sharing my screen, I'm actually going to just leave the full screen of Andre's presentation just so I can look through some of the questions. One more reminder for now, but I'll remind you one more time as the webinar is ending. Just as you're leaving, if you can please fill out the survey that's going to pop up. Okay, so I just need to go through some of these. Okay, so just bear with me a moment. Okay. Okay, here's where the questions are. Somebody asked, can we load JMeter scripts from version 3.3, or do we have to rebuild them from scratch?
Oh, well, sure. JMeter was always supporting previous scripts, so you can open JMeter script built in the previous version, not only 3.3, but any of previous versions until like 2.13 at least, and it will perfectly run and perfectly work.
Okay. There were a few questions about the boundary aspect in JMeter 4.0. One of them is a question, how can I handle dynamic boundary with the new feature?
Dynamic boundary.
And somebody, he followed up, just I just want to say, there's a follow-up, what if my left or right boundary has a dynamic number generated every time we call a page?
No problem, you can always use it like, let's get wild. Let's say I want boundary extractor of title. I have a title, so let's have something starting with my title and ending with the open quote. Will it work? I have no idea. It should be header now. Header, it's empty. Why? Okay, and now I know why. I know why, because we should do something better like this. And boom. You see, the boundary options can be dynamic themselves. You can use variables here. Because this is the detail of how JMeter executes your extractors. First, it executes sampler, then it executes first extractor, and this variable is already defined. Then it moves to the next extractor, and you can already use this variable in the fields of this extractor. Because in JMeter, any good component always supports variable evaluation in all of the text fields. I hope this answers your question.
Okay, next question. What is the impact of the parallel controller to how TCP connections? And also, can we use this for AJAX calls similar of a similar browser making a bunch of requests at the same time?
Making these parallel AJAX calls is exactly why parallel controller were implemented, because there were requirement of doing dynamic parallel AJAX calls. It's not that simple to master the parallel controller. For example, you cannot use it inside transaction controller, and you cannot use transaction controller inside it. This is the limitation that comes from JMeter core, because transaction controller is a special component for JMeter. But and one more notice about parallel controller is that you create the thread for each of these objects, additional thread that will run in parallel to each other. Additional thread means that TCP connections will be open in parallel for these 2 requests, or 5 requests if you do them. So parallel TCP connections, there are complex situations that might be happening inside this parallel controller, but it was exactly designed for AJAX calls modeling. That's it.
Okay, several questions on Taurus, actually. So the first one is from Lisa. Is there a way to specify to disable all assertions in Taurus when running a JMX script?
You have to know the names for those assertions. There is, let me try to find that. There is the syntax of disabling, there is the syntax of disabling your items in your JMX. So you can specify that you are disabling some object, but you have to know the names of those objects. So if all of your assertions are named like, I don't know, where's my assertion? Here it is. If all of your assertions are called JSON assertion, then you would put here the instruction into disable section JSON assertion, and it will run. I could quickly build the script to demonstrate you this with my JMX here, but it's not worth time of everyone to see how I'm typing these instructions in my text editor. So just believe me that this is doable through these scenario modifications disable. And you can always look up this piece of in JMeter executor of Taurus. There is a section called modifications for existing scripts, which explains you how you can disable something by name, or enable, or set properties to override in your JMX file. Next question, please.
Yes, a few more questions about Taurus. What Selenium versions can Taurus support?
Strictly speaking, it depends on which Selenium version do you have installed in your machine. So it's the control on the versions is in your hands. There are several things that Taurus gives you as a convenience around Selenium. For example, you can specify the versions of, where it is, it downloads and installs Chrome driver and Gecko driver automatically, and you have control on versions of Chrome driver and Gecko driver through through the configuration file of Taurus. It's not mandatory. You can use your own versions of it, and Taurus does install some of Selenium libraries for Java and for Python by default, but it's again in your hands to upgrade or downgrade those libraries for a desired version of Selenium, and it will just work. If you're having any trouble with that, just come to our GitHub channel or email support forum, and we will help you.
Okay. Let's see here. JMeter question. Somebody asked, what do you suggest to use in place of Workbench in JMeter?
There are components that are used. First of all, if you have used Workbench in the past, the components from it, if you open JMX in 4.0, they won't be lost. They will just go into appropriate form of places. The main thing to use is test fragment. This is where you were using Workbench previously. It's the test fragment. Test fragment is something that you were using with module controller of JMeter. If we will take module controller, this is the test fragment that you can now use in your module controller. It's like a subroutine call. So this module controller points to this test fragment, which means executing this HTTP request. And this is the main thing to remember instead of Workbench. This is not executable test fragment, which is meant to be used by module controller. Some of the items are something that you can just put on top. The test fragment is the most important.
Okay. Somebody asked, can you talk a little bit more about the use between JMeter 4.0 and Elasticsearch? And then he followed up saying, what setup is needed to export JMeter results data to Elasticsearch?
I'm sorry, I have no experience with Elasticsearch and JMeter, so I cannot meaningfully explain something. I just see that maintainer of the plugin for Elasticsearch is pretty active. He fixes bugs, he updates the versions, which means that there's something happening with this plugin. And I wanted to share that there is such an active plugin in the space. But I'm sorry, I have no background with Elasticsearch.
Okay, a question, does JMeter 4 support Selenium tests, and which version does it support? I assume maybe he means the WebDriver sampler, I'm not sure. Do I need to add a plugin for this, or is it default in JMeter 4?
Yes, you need to add the plugin through custom plugins. There is WebDriver support, but fairly, I don't like this plugin that much because it lacks the support. It requires you to script some weird own JMeter kind of scripts. And why I don't like that? Because I have Taurus. In Taurus, it all is much, much easier. I already shown you that. In Taurus, you can use scripts that are written and that work not only inside JMeter, or not only work inside Taurus, but they will work outside Taurus also. The typical situation is that, like here, I am having a Selenium script that I wrote in Java. And this is the thing to understand with JMeter and Selenium tests. You will have to write things like this, like you see on your screen, but inside JMeter. And there's no good way to debug that inside JMeter. I would rather use my IDE to write the Java files or Python files in IDE, enjoy all of the debugging capabilities of IDE, and run these scripts with Taurus to measure response times or to loop or to scale with BlazeMeter, and maintaining these difficult scripts in JMeter without debugging abilities and being stuck to JMeter. There's no way for this script. It's not Taurus specific. It's just Java JUnit. I can use Taurus to execute this script, or I can use any other tool to execute this script. It doesn't limit me. While in JMeter, when you use the WebDriver component, it limits you, and in case you feeling troublesome, you will have to just throw away all of the scripts you wrote and go recreate them in other tools. So I'm discouraging anyone from using WebDriver component in JMeter, and instead just use regular IDEs, write regular JUnit, PyTest, Python nose test, Selenium scripts, or use even this syntax in Taurus, and then use something including Taurus to execute these scripts.
Okay. Andre, there were a few questions. I know you didn't present in this webinar about the HLS plugin. Do we have time to show it, or do we rather like I can respond to these people directly?
I don't have any experience or knowledge with HLS anyway, so I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer this.
Okay, so the few people asked, we will send you some information, okay, that we do have. Yeah. In a Taurus YAML file, how do you tell it what category of tests you would like to execute? Maybe I'm not sure what it means by category. Maybe it means which executor itself.
So let's try to answer these questions in several ways. First, in Taurus, we can specify with, for example, Postman YAML, there is -func to switch between performance testing mode and functional testing mode. Functional testing mode will mean that there will be just one execution for the test sequence, and the results will be written in special form of the JSON like this. There will be lots of results written in a different form. So we have a switch between functional and performance. Another switch that might answer your question is that we are using the executor. This is the executor instruction, which means which kind of open source tool to use under the hood to execute the test. It's not that I can take Newman and execute JMeter test. No, if I have JMX test, then I have to use JMeter as executor. But if I'm using this syntax of like this, of YAML script, then I can put here, instead of nose, I could put JMeter, I could put Gatling grinder. If I'm not using some of the too much specifics of an executor, it will work. And another way to answer the question is, if you want to run the subset of your tests, and by that you mean the category of your tests, the only way for you to manipulate that is to point in your Taurus configuration file with the option scenario or with the option script, you point to a directory which you want to execute or a file which you want to execute. You cannot, if you're using some advanced feature of tagging with category in your in your load testing tool. Taurus currently does not support that, but you might come to us and discuss what exactly you want, and we might add that in the future.
Okay.
Final question?
Yeah, one last one, I think. Andre, yeah. Somebody asked, how can we verify multiple values in an array using the JSON assertion?
Multiple values. It's a problematic. You might want to use the feature that if I will, for example, use instruction like this, it will mean that the result of this is all of the titles, or let's say ID, will be shorter. All of the IDs of all of the items. And if we will see, come on, this. And if we will see how it goes, no class. What? JSON path. I don't know, something went wrong with my JSON component after I have installed something. I have uninstalled the JSON plugin. Wait a second, please. JSON. It seems that I've used the custom plugin instead, but anyway. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so this is the string. If I have extracted a string of, if I have extracted an array, if I have specified an array in my JSON path, then I can use here the string representation of array to validate against this JSON path, JSON path condition. If I need to validate not full array but parts of it, I would need one assertion per part to make sure that it exists like one, and then I would copy and use two to make sure that they match. This is how I would approach that with the existing JMeter components.
Okay, so thanks again to Andre for presenting. That was a really great presentation. Thanks to everybody for the questions. I know that there were more questions than we were able to answer. However, we have received all of them, and we'll try to respond to a few more by email. Okay, please remember that I will send the recording likely tomorrow, but if not tomorrow, then on Thursday. So keep an eye out for that, as well as with some follow-up resources. And one final reminder, if you can, please fill out the survey that will pop up now as we're ending the webinar. We would highly appreciate it. Thank you to all for coming. Have a great rest of the day or afternoon or evening, wherever you may be. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.